Hello and welcome back to We Love the State. How you doing? It's great to have you here. I'm great to have my co-host here. Oh wait, I gotta look this way to see you. Anyway, how you doing, Ben?
Doing great. It's been it was a good weekend and excited to be here. We have an amazing guest sometimes I kind of look at it like a little bit selfishly because I'm super excited about the guest, but I'm sure everybody else will really appreciate the conversation we have today. And yeah, this is one of those like dream guests that it just kind of fell in our lap, and so excited to have the amazing Clint Russell with us today from Liberty Lockdown podcast. He is a great voice in the Libertarian Party and just in liberty in general. Kind of the impetus that brought him to us is that Clint was a guest speaker at the Michigan Libertarian Party convention that was held recently in Holland, Michigan. And he was on a panel for one of the days, and then he had kind of an open mic Q&A on one of the other days. And it just felt like I had so many other questions that I wanted to ask him and talk to him about. Didn't want to take the whole convention and just, my questions. So to be able to reach out to him and have him agree to come onto the podcast was just so cool. So yeah, so excited to have him with us today, and can't wait to chat and get his opinion on a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed this conversation. Let me know two things. One, I don't know shit about Bitcoin. I thought I knew some. I don't. So it was great to have somebody who's well versed in this stuff come on and kind of explain some of the things to me and Ben. I had a great time. It was very, very cool to just be on a podcast with Clint Russell. It's cool. So,
yeah, and the topic, one of the topics that we're going to talk about today is activism in the Libertarian Party. I think it's a topic that doesn't get enough discussion. And so again, super excited to have that discussion. And I think it's going to be the first of many because I think it's a subject matter that's worth having a discussion about because of how it impacts any political party, but specifically for us, the Libertarian Party. So yeah, I can't be more excited, and even better yet is our guest lineup is continuing to grow and amaze. So like this is just the start. So buckle up, hold on to your seats. We are taking off.
Yeah, it's cool. So, all right, guys, let's get into this interview. You can find me on TikTok at Andy Coons, Koons. You can find me on Twitter at Andy_Coons. You might have noticed that there wasn't a YouTube upload last week. I'm working on it. There are some internet issues. And then, so there might, I don't know, maybe this one isn't on YouTube tomorrow either. We'll find out. But anyway, you got some plugs, Ben?
You can find me on Instagram, picture this, 1979. You can also find me on Facebook, Ben DeJong, DeJong. Also, if you are into photography or looking for a photographer, you can always find me. My website is DeJongPhotography.net. So yeah, any of those are great. And yeah, again, super excited to be here and to talk to Clint and Andy.
All right, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Clint Russell. We got a very, very interesting, very cool guest today. We've got Clint Russell. How you doing, Clint?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being on.
By the way, I'm host of Liberty Lockdown. For your listeners that don't know me, you can find Liberty Lockdown on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, everywhere else. Twitter at Liberty Lockpod. And I am known for first railing against the lockdowns, and I was a mortgage broker, so now my specialty has kind of been an ESG coverage and trying to get the Libertarian Party to be the vanguard in the fight against ESG being environmental social governance, basically the mechanism by which wokeness has taken over all of corporate America and the corporate environment globally. So a big threat.
So that clearly that's going to have to be topic number 2 for the next podcast we do, because that's also super fascinating, because I have read some on it. I guess probably Glenn Beck is the one that I've heard the most about ESG from. So yeah, that would be a great topic for another podcast.
Cool.
So to jump into this one, one of the reasons why I reached out to Clint was he was one of the guest speakers at the Michigan Libertarian Convention a couple weeks ago now. And one of the topics that came up was from Justin Amash. I can't remember if it was just the Saturday conversation. Actually, you know what? I think he touched on this at both times that he chatted. One of the things that he talked about was his opinion that there should be a divorce of activism from political parties. So definitely something that I don't think I've ever heard talked about, in whether it's podcasting or even in like articles. So it was a really good thought experiment. I know when I first started talking to some of the fellow libertarians at the convention, I got a lot of negativity from them saying, well, that's ridiculous, yada yada. But the more I thought about it, the more I could see his perspective. So to start us off, I'll give you guys kind of where I'm thinking he was coming from, because at the same time, I don't know if he was necessarily as clear as he could have been. But my viewpoint from his perspective, and again, not to put words in his mouth, but again, this is my viewpoint, is that the problem with activism within a political party is while you may excite some people, you can turn off others. So a political party's main focus should be growing the party and winning elections. And so Justin, he did acknowledge that activism is important. And specifically in regards to the Libertarian Party, he said, we don't do enough of it. His point, though, was it shouldn't be the party that's doing the activism. It should be a caucus. It should be a think tank like the Mises Institute. So it was a very interesting thought, and I personally haven't really come down on one side or the other. I guess my initial reaction was somewhere in between, but I know that Clint also was at the convention, and I could tell that his wheels were spinning too in regards to that topic. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Clint, and discussing it a little bit further, especially for those who, this is a foreign topic to them. I think this was it's a good venue, good opportunity to discuss it further and see if we can hash it out a little bit more. So
Yeah.
what were your initial thoughts, and have you thought about it since?
I mean, my initial thoughts were I totally disagree. And then I thought about it more. I mean, even by the time he was maybe halfway done with that speech, I had kind of changed my mind. What I realized while he was talking was Justin Amash is actually talking about winning. He's actually talking about winning political power. And the activists are largely talking about just accepting our fate of being this third party non-entity. And that is why they are focused on activism. And so my belief is that the two camps don't actually disagree with one another as much as they just are functioning from a different mindset. Justin is saying, this is what we had. Like, it's basically an Adam Smith division of labor argument where, like, yes, activism is good, but it should be over here. Like, the political party is strictly about attaining political power and growing the party in order to do so. So I don't think Amash is wrong, actually. I just think it boils down to, do you think we can actually grow the party to a level at which we can get elected into political power, at which point we can actually change these things that we have been activists for forever, ending wars and ending the Fed and all these other things. it's a really interesting debate. It's one that's pretty much timeless. I mean, we've all been having this argument forever as to whether or not a third party will ever have a chance of actually attaining legitimate political power in this country. And I think the jury's out. So I think that if your goal is ultimately the same as Justin's, which is to attain political power as a third party and to become, say, the second party or whatever, and to break the duopoly, as they say, well, then he's probably right. But if you don't believe that's possible, then I think that the activist side and using the LP venue, the LP Twitter account to try and end the war in Yemen, for instance, which is what they've been doing for the past month, well, I think that makes a ton of sense. So I don't think there's necessarily a right and wrong answer here. And I know that's kind of sounds like a milquetoast response, but I've given it a lot of thought, and that's what I've concluded.
Well, it sounds like we're kind of the same mind then. What are your thoughts of? I think one point he made was a concern with the Mises, the larger Mises influence at this point in the party, and that it is going to has or will bring more activism into the party. Have you seen that so far, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's clear that it has, because Scott Horton and Dave and Angela, like all the higher ups, are pushing these kind of monthly activist calls to action. And the first one was to end the war in Yemen. The next one seems like it's about Bitcoin. I hope if I have my druthers, we will eventually make ESG kind of a monthly push. So I think that it's clear that the Mises Caucus is viewing the LP vehicle as a platform from which to, activate, to be an activist. So I think he's right. If that's ultimately a negative thing, time will tell. I think that from our current position, like, if you don't believe we have enough time to go from a third party to getting elected into federal office, well, then it makes sense to use the LP as strictly an activist platform. And I don't know. If I knew, I probably would be moving out of the country. If I thought that we had no chance of that, I'd probably be like, all right, well, then I just got to go, set up shop in Mexico or something, like a lot of people have done. But I'm not that convinced that we will absolutely fall apart, that, it's pointless to try and have a longer time horizon in your goal setting. So that's really the debate. But he's not wrong. I mean, the Mises Caucus has come in and it has become a more activist entity. There's just no doubt about that.
If you kind of had your druthers and let's give you the keys to the Libertarian Party, how would you kind of draw a line in the sand as far as activism goes? Because I think that there are some things that are broad enough that really make sense for a party. Again, we're very anti-war, so the whole Yemen thing, I didn't see a downside to that, type of again, activism, but I would almost, small a almost activism, because to me it's almost a no-brainer, especially for the Libertarian Party. Sure. But things like pushing Bitcoin, and I know that was more like a fundraiser, but at the same time, I'm more of a Peter Schiff gold bug, and so for me, like, Bitcoin it's a fad. I think it's a bubble, and eventually it's going to pop. Or if it's not a bubble and it does great, then the Federal Reserve's going to end up taking it over. So for me, like, an activism, being
it can't take it over. It can't take it over. But I agree with you. Otherwise, like, it could certainly have downside. But this is exactly Justin's point.
Right.
Activism, even activism that seems, I mean, because anything that subverts the Federal Reserve, like, all of us can kind of get behind at least the thought experiment behind it. Whether or not you believe in Bitcoin is kind of secondary. But this is a great example as to why activism is potentially a detriment to the party, because it is even with us all being so similarly minded, we still have strong differences of opinion between gold and cryptocurrency. So I think that's a great case for Justin's argument.
Yeah, and kind of, I was also kind of thinking, like, because he did mention that the Republicans and the Democrats have a chance of having activism within their party because they're bigger and they can afford the risk of turning people off. So, you do see activism in the abortion debate. So it's so hard to, again, trying to think of it as a purist. Like, I don't even know if a political party could completely divorce itself from activism, because the party has to stand for something. And if it does, how do you not champion that? So it is kind of it's definitely, I don't know where to exactly land.
No, I mean, it's a tough debate, and I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't know if we should be focused. Like from my vantage point, I do think that things are dire enough, and that we're small enough of a party that we need to take swings, you know. And I think that this picking some topics to be an activist about as the party is probably like the cost benefit analysis. Like there's way more benefit than there is cost to us. So from my vantage point, that makes sense. I think that we should be taking swings when it comes to ESG, because I think ESG is a huge threat. But this is my vantage point. So there's going to be people that disagree. I think that ending the war in Yemen, like there is no downside to that, as you said. Like I think that would be just a net incredible win if we played any part in lobbying to get that to stop. That would be a huge win, and it would also wake up the left, who wanted to see Obama or Biden end these terrible, unjust wars or proxy wars, or our support for these, genocides, more or less. I think that would wake them up to like, well, hey, my party isn't actually delivering on these things. These libertarians are actually fucking doing something. That would be meaningful. So I think that it goes both ways. But at the same time, it could divide the base, So you have to ask yourself, like, are you more interested in congealing and keeping the base tight, or are you going to take some risks and try and bring people in that would not consider us because we are now delivering on things? We are swinging outside of our weight class. We're fighting outside of our weight class because we only get 2 or 3% of the vote, but all of a sudden we're actually, because we're playing on the margin, we're able to shift elections. We're able to, lobby Congress. We're able to do things like that actually create more freedom and more peace in this world today. That's meaningful as hell. And to me, I think that that's worth the risk. I really believe that. So as much as I respect Justin and I understand his argumentation, I would love to, say this to him and have him retort. I would love to know what he would say to that, because I think that he would have to admit, if the Libertarian Party was that straw that broke the camel's back and ended the war in Yemen, like how incredible would that be? Like, could he actually argue against it because it divided the party in some fashion? Like I find that hard to believe that he would push back.
So I wasn't at the excuse me, I wasn't at the most recent Michigan convention. And so I didn't see Justin Amash's speech. I've kind of got an idea of what it was, but do you think that this is, and I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, but do you think that this is like a sort of a backlash from the new messaging from like the Twitter account and the social medias? So
yeah,
that's something that I don't like. I don't know, maybe I'm an idiot, but I don't understand how people don't get that, because me, like I came from the radical left, like I grew up conservative, rebelled against my parents, became an atheist, became like a fucking communist, and then kind of just got chewed up and spit out by the left because I thought genocide was wrong, going way too deep into my own life story. But it was like, I remember listening to Part of the Problem was what brought me into libertarianism,
I love it.
Yeah. So whenever I think about like bold messaging, the Mises Caucus is all about like strong messaging, bold messaging, and red pilling people, that's something that I place very high value on, because it was bold messaging and it was kind of sort of balls on the wall messaging that was just kind of like, oh, you think racism is so bad? War is worse than racism, War is worse than transphobia. War is worse than homophobia. And there's fucking numbers to back it up,
Yeah.
And so,
and it's not close, by the way.
like not remotely close. And yeah. I mean, if you just look at the number of people who have died in war over the past century versus the number of lynchings, we're talking into the single digit percentage,
Oh yeah.
It's ridiculous. But back to the messaging. that's something that I think is extremely important, because if you want to, like, we're trying to talk to people who have been Democrats their entire life or Republicans their entire life. You know, they've heard almost everything. And so I feel like it's kind of our responsibility to go in there and shake things up and be like, hey, did you know that Ronald Reagan was a piece of shit? Did you know that? And no, it's not because of maybe he said something about black people or maybe he said something about women. He took away your Second Amendment rights. Did you know that? You know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, I can't get on the train of being against bold, even edgy, or maybe even offensive messaging, because I'm like, that's what brought me in. I'm not so unique to her. I'm not a fucking, I don't know what cliche you want to use. I'm not that special. There's a million people out there just like me that would be affected by that messaging just like I was. So
yeah,
I think it's a
I'm
winning
with you.
strategy. I don't know why people are, I don't understand why people are against it.
Well, and I also think that, like, the important thing to remember is you're dealing with people that are largely partisan in nature. So they are already indoctrinated into the R or D team. So how are you going to reach them if it's not something profound that strikes them at their core, that points out that what they espouse is not being delivered on by their party? You have to fucking hammer them with that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, they're never going to listen to you. Yeah. And I think it's really important that we are not just bold, but early and right. Like when we came out, like the Libertarian Party, had it come out, had it taken that activist stance when it came to fighting against the lockdowns, like, we would look like geniuses right now, because we'd be the only political party that railed against it from day one. But we didn't do that. And that was cowardly and pathetic, and it cost us a lot.
Yeah.
And this is the whole reason the Mises Caucus took over, is because so many people like me were fucking furious about it. So I think that we cannot allow that to happen again. Like, when you see the potential for central bank digital currencies, the Libertarian Party should be the siren call to the world that is a red line that cannot be passed. We cannot allow for it. Same thing with, future lockdowns, whether it be because of monkeypox or polio or whatever, all this new fear-mongering bullshit that they're throwing out there. Like, we have opportunities because we're dealing with an increasingly tyrannical government. They continue to provide us opportunities to stand apart from the duopoly and say, look how special and unique we are. That's meaningful, especially if you're right and you're early. And I just think that that's a no-brainer. It has to be that. Like, we don't actually necessarily have to go the activist route, but we have to at least be messaging like, this is a no-go zone. Anybody that values the fundamental principles of America, which the ones that we like, which are liberty and self-defense and bodily autonomy, all these things that we actually all kind of are on the same team about, you get a chance to get up on a pedestal and scream to high heaven how immoral and insane what's happening in this country is, or in this world. You got to take that shot. So I'm with you, man. I think the bold messaging is vitally important. It's to me, it's not even debatable. If they want to, this is the whole reason that the old guard was so fucking worthless and pathetic, is that all they wanted to do was be safe. They still wanted to get invited to the cocktail parties in DC, the Cato Institute, and all these people. Their priorities are totally off. They're not with us. They're not with the populist libertarian movement that exists, that it has a pulse that is real. And I will be damned if I see that not propelled into the LP moving forward. Like, that's the whole reason I got involved. That's the reason I support the Mises Caucus. It's the reason I love Dave Smith and Michael Heiss and Angela. Like, they're all studs. And I don't think that they're going to lose that, because I think that they see it the exact same way that you and I do. At least I hope so.
Where do you think messaging ends?
By the way, am I allowed to cuss? I'm sorry.
I'm
just
You better fucking not cuss, dude. I'll be so goddamn pissed.
I was like, I'm so deep into this already. I've said, anyway.
So where do you guys think, like, messaging ends and activism begins? Because I totally agree on the messaging front. That was a huge, not just a miss on the lockdowns from the Libertarian Party, but that we dug ourselves a hole because we didn't address it. So, but where do you see, like, where does the activism start and messaging end?
Well, I think it's call to action. If you're actually, like, trying to organize protests and things like that, like, that would probably get more into the activist realm. If you're trying to get them to call their congressman, that would be more the activist realm. Whereas if it's just messaging, that it's saying, hey, if you agree that this is a huge problem, then you should be with the Libertarian Party. You know, that's kind of the messaging non-activist realm. So it's kind of a fine line, but I think there's enough of a delineation that it's fairly significant.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that too, even from the Yemen perspective. Like, you know, calling your congressman is such a, I mean, yes, it's a big part because I mean, there is, you know, something that you're asking people to do, but it's more of, you know, the messaging that I value is shining a light on something. And I think the Libertarian Party should be doing that, like all the time. And so that messaging, I'm 100%. And so, you know, maybe that's just something else that, yeah, you know, further discussions as far as like where the line is and then where do you want to cross the line.
Right.
Because I think it's kind of like picking your battles. Like, does this completely align with our party and our principles? And then you cross the line. If that, you know, and maybe that's a discussion for Angela or more for party leadership as far as like what is their decision process for like
Yeah.
when do they think the party needs to move in a certain direction?
Well, I'll give my viewpoint on it is that when you have certainty, then cross the line. Like I don't have certainty that the Wuhan, Institute was where COVID came from, and that like Fauci was funding it through NIH and IAD. Like I think that's what happened, but I don't have 100% certainty. So I'm not going to cross the line into activism on that. I think it's fine for the LP to message on that though. Like they should actually be highlighting, hey, this is an important thing that we should know the answer to, and we should probably be demanding answers to that. But I don't think that we need to like organize protests to go get that answer because we don't know for sure. Mm-hmm. So, but when it comes to lockdowns, we know damn well that's not an acceptable libertarian position to hold, and we should be fighting it from day one, day zero, preferably. Like before, like as soon as it's a rumor that's even in the ether that they might lock us in our fucking houses for 2 years, like we need to be saying no, not an acceptable position to hold. Any libertarian should be on board with that. Some aren't, which I don't give a fuck about those people. I don't want them involved with the Libertarian Party. If you think that a airborne pathogen is adequate for the government to then dictate that you cannot go to work, I don't want you involved with the Libertarian Party. You don't value liberty. You value security. You're not a libertarian at all. That's my personal point. I know it's gatekeeping and blah, 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 blah. And you're not supposed to fuck those people. I don't care. You're not a libertarian, and I will not refer to you as one. So I think when you have certainty, when it's like crystal clear, CBDC, again, crystal clear. Any libertarian that knows anything about central banking or about the mechanisms by which the government will be able to control our savings and be able to increase inflation and confiscation and taxes and everything else. It's like this is a panopticon. Like this is just clearly evil at its core, non-starter. I think we should cross the line on that. So I think that's when we have certainty, that's when you cross the line. When it's still, in the conspiracy theory-ish realm, maybe just keep with the messaging and keep with asking questions.
That's a good point. So if we could, if everybody's okay with this, if we could kind of switch gears a little bit and kind of segue into Bitcoin. You were on part of the problem with, was it Guy Swan? Yeah. First of all, both those episodes, fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I
love hearing to people love hearing people talk about Bitcoin, and I'm very fascinated with it. I don't have a ton. I think I have $17.50 in Bitcoin in my Coinbase app. But
that is not a ton.
No,
it's definitely not a ton.
Yeah, I'm definitely not retiring anytime soon.
That's a quarter tank of gas in Joe Biden's economy.
So, my question to you are somebody who is way, way, way more knowledgeable in this stuff than I could probably ever hope to be. So my question to you is, blockchain technology is something that I hear a lot of Bitcoin detractors talk about. Now, I know very little about blockchain technology. Thanks to Ben, actually, I understand a little bit of what it does. And it seems like something that could be used to cause harm to people who are investing in cryptocurrency. So if we, I guess what's the workaround to blockchain technology, or what's your answer to people who are like, I don't want to get into Bitcoin because of this ledger?
Well, it's traceable, but it's not confiscatable. So, like, if you have it, yes, I guess the government could figure it out if they were intelligent enough to do so, especially if you have purchased it on a KYC account where, like, the know your customer, you actually have submitted information about your personal details. So, like, it's on the record. You can buy it anonymously, in which case then you would avoid that threat. So that's always a possibility. But then when you use it, obviously there would be a record that was on the public ledger that people could kind of backtrace and be able to figure out what has transpired. So it goes both ways, though. It's like a double-edged sword here. Like, it also, as much as it does add for the potential for surveillance, it also is the reason that it's real. You know, it has a public ledger that is audited by all the nodes on the blockchain, and it's like that's kind of vitally important for everyone to know that when you purchase something with this Bitcoin, that it is actually, you're getting what you think you are. So I don't know if you can really get away from the blockchain and the potential for surveillance that comes with it, other than either buying it without KYC or I forgot. I had a second one, but and encryption. You know, if you were to go the encryption route, I think that there are other layers that you can put on it. There are obviously competitors, Monero and things like that, that are more encrypted and less traceable. So I don't know. I'm not a programmer, so I can't give you the answer as to like why those either are necessary or aren't ultimately. I think that it's important to hedge as long as you're uncertain. I think it's always important that you diversify your portfolio and you hedge in both directions, because ultimately one of them will probably take off.
What do you think? Because I mean, the last time I think I read something, we were looking at over 20,000 different cryptocurrencies out there.
Yeah.
And I know, Peter Schiff kind of lambasts that as clearly it's not rare or it's not unique because there are so many of them. Where do you think, um, what do you think the future is for, not, I guess you could say Bitcoin, but like cryptocurrencies in general?
Well, I mean, I think that ultimately central bank cryptocurrencies are coming, whether we like it or not. It's just a matter of whether or not we allow it to happen in America. But there are, CBDCs that are popping up in other countries already. They have white papers out there. They're already, publicly discussing it at Davos and things like that. So it's coming. So cryptocurrency is here to stay. There's no doubt about that. It's just like whether or not the decentralized kind of independent, the stuff that we like, will that be a part of the game moving forward, or will it strictly be relegated to the central bank digital currencies? I don't know. I mean, I think that depends a lot on whether or not we prevail in any meaningful fashion. Personally, I think that as the tyranny increases and the kind of totalitarian CBDC panopticon gets rolled out, there's going to be more and more people like us that go, I don't want to be involved with that. I'm going to go the decentralized cryptocurrency route. So I'm going to get involved with Monero or Bitcoin or whatever. So I don't think that those markets are ever going to go away. But it's very much in doubt as to which ultimately becomes the standard bearer. I mean, Bitcoin has been by far the most stable, or not the most stable, but certainly the largest. So I lean in that direction just simply because of the network effect and adoption and utilization. And, there's many reasons as to why Bitcoin is the front runner and has the greatest odds of being the ultimate standard bearer for decentralized cryptocurrency moving forward. But, if I knew, I'd put all my money in it, and I don't. So I haven't, that's kind of how it goes.
My viewpoint is like never underestimate the federal government and that what they're willing to do for power and control. And
Totally
I
agree.
think currency manipulation, I don't know if there's anything that tops that as far as again what they're willing to do. And so that's part of mine is like either Bitcoin or cryptocurrency as a whole, it's going to really succeed, and it could threaten the US dollar or whatever is going to replace it. And therefore, again, the federal government's not going to allow that, or it's going to be usurped or replaced. So it's kind of one of those. I mean, again, we're totally like looking hypothetically into the future to say, well, where do we see this? Where do we see this going? And I totally agree with you as far as like the digital dollar. Not to just put on my conspiracy hat and say I think that's kind of one of their plans all along. And if we have a currency crisis, they already have an answer waiting, and that is a digital currency is going to be the savior from the disaster that they created. So
No doubt.
I just kind of wonder again if they're going to jump full into a digital currency. The last thing they want is anybody using an alternative like Bitcoin or any of the others.
Totally. I've said for years now, distinct possibility that they could criminalize all non-central bank cryptocurrencies. Like it's happened in other countries, so like of course it could happen here. I don't even understand how people say they couldn't. The primary defense though is that it's not confiscatable. Like if you don't have it on an exchange like Coinbase or any of these big boys out there, you can have it on a cold wallet, one that's offline, and you can have your code, your string of words or whatever to access it that only you know. And I don't know how they're going to confiscate that besides, rounding up everybody that's done that and putting them in prison and torturing them to death until they give up the code. Like, that is ultimately our last line of defense, is that if enough people have that and have done that and have actually migrated off of the exchanges into, self-custodianship, well, then you're probably to a point where you will forever have a black market that's trading with these types of cryptocurrencies. And I think that's probably where we'll end up, is that you will have a kind of agorist workaround separate economy that deals with all of the people that have, been canceled from the accepted world, the accepted economy. And I think I hope we don't get there. It's very dystopian to believe that we will, but on our current trajectory, that does kind of look inevitable. So I don't want to dismiss it either. It certainly seems like a very high probability. So I'm not sure, but I think, like I said, though, I do think that there will be a market for it, because even if they criminalize it, like there's going to be people that don't want to play ball, that want to be able to have, financial freedom, even if it jeopardizes their physical freedom by being imprisoned.
Well, it's a good thing I'm really into S&M, because the prison and torture I'm ready for.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
All right, cool. You're good to go then.
Prison? You mean boner camp? I'm there.
I feel like I'm back on Tower Gang.
What do you think about other alternative currencies? So the one that I've gotten big into recently are gold backs, which are, I think there are 4 states now, and gaining more ground. Thoughts on something like that?
It's a great idea, but it could be criminalized too. I mean, like if it ever were to get such significant adoption that it threatens, their hegemonic rule, I mean, I think that it'll be just as hard to trade with that as it would cryptocurrency, honestly. So, like, I think it's the same with gold and silver, physical coins and things like that. Like, yeah, I think, but as I said, because we don't know, I think hedging and diversifying into all of these is very prudent until you get a better feel for which one is going to win out, which one is going to have some level of adoption or acceptance from the powers that be. And then you probably want to have some currency that is completely banned by the powers that be, so that if they ever change their mind, well, then you already have, your toes in another bucket, so to speak. So this is unfortunate. People get mad at me when I give such vague advice, but it's like, this is the truth. Like money managers and stuff like that will tell you, nah, it's Bitcoin. No, it's stocks. No, it's bonds. No, it's this, it's that. And they'll be really definitive. They're wrong. They're wrong to do that, because we are dealing with such a tumultuous investing environment. Like I am one of the few people that's actually telling you the truth. We don't know. If any of us knew, we would be I probably wouldn't even be telling you, because I'd just be raking in, billions, because I'd be front running it and trading it and crushing. So you're probably never going to know. I mean, unless you get insider information, unless you have access to the Fed and you can, sneak in on their meetings or go into Davos and hear what they're, scheming.
Unless you're really Nancy Pelosi.
Well, yes,
I was gonna
exactly. I mean,
say Bitcoin
you
doesn't
can-
have a Nancy Pelosi yet.
no, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Kind of along those lines, how are you kind of preparing for this, recession that we may or may not? I mean, I think we're already in it, but there's still debate on that. I know that you had talked
Nope. There's
about,
no debate. We're in a recession. I promise.
yeah, you had talked about real estate, and I can't remember if you were getting out of real estate or getting into real estate. But
Getting
how are
out.
you kind of preparing financially?
Yeah, well, I'm building 6 houses right now, and I hope to sell them all within the next couple months. So that's, for me, the real estate market is a non-starter because of the increasing interest rate cycle that we're in. Until the Fed relents on that, real estate is very much in danger, strictly because of affordability. You can't purchase as much house or pay as much for that house because now your interest rate has gone from 3% to 6%. That's a very, very big and a very rapid shift that the market hasn't really seen the impact of yet. But you are, in certain areas, certain markets, you're already seeing price reductions in terms of asking price. The main buoying factor is the fact we have very limited inventory, and you still have a ton of demand for housing. So those that can still qualify are going to buy a house even in this environment. And until inventory increases, you're not, just strict supply and demand calculation. Like, we don't have enough supply. We don't have enough supply of housing, and because of local ordinances and planning departments and their bureaucracy, not to mention the inflation, which has hammered the input costs of building new inventory, whether it be lumber or electrical or plumbing, all of that stuff skyrocketed over the past 2 years. So that means that you're only going to develop and build housing if you think you can sell it for a premium over that extraordinarily expensive cost of going through years of planning and then all of the material costs. Like, there's massive government interference in this market. So I'm not certain that we will see a repeat of 0809, but I think that there's a tremendous potential for a decrease in the real estate market if they continue with these promised interest rate hikes. So that's the primary reason I'm exiting the real estate market, is because I don't have enough clarity to know. So I would like to exit that and diversify myself further into the cryptocurrency space, precious metals. So I still have an inflation hedge, and then probably cherry pick some stocks because the stock market has been hammered. So and then sit on some cash for, if I'm right and the real estate market does get hit, then I'll be able to swoop in and be kind of a buyer of last resort if we do have a wave of foreclosures and things of that nature. So that's what I'm doing. It was a very long-winded answer, but I hope that gave you some clarity.
Yeah.
Well, it definitely didn't help me at all because I just signed, I just closed on my house, and now I'm like,
shit.
oh shit, how much is my mortgage going to go up? Like, I'm so
No,
nervous.
if you have a fixed interest rate, your mortgage will not go up.
Okay, thank God. I don't know shit about any of this stuff. So
well, that I hope I relieved some stress for you.
Okay, all right.
They don't really do adjustable rate mortgages anymore, so you should be okay in that regard. And that's the primary reason that we won't have a repeat of 0809 is because it was like half of the mortgages from 05 through 07 were all adjustable rate mortgages, which means that as the interest rates increased, people had their monthly payments shift upwards, sometimes very dramatically, which made them immediately exit that holding. They just said, fuck this, I can't afford it, I'm walking away. Well, if you have enough people do that in a massive wave, which is exactly what occurred because we were in a recession, they were losing their job, they're like, well, I can't afford this, I'm walking away. All of a sudden you have millions of houses that are hitting the market all at the same time, and you don't have nearly enough buyers to absorb that demand, which obviously makes the prices cascade downwards. And that's what we saw. I don't think we'll see that again, simply because we have so little inventory still. But the problem is that in an inflationary environment, people can't afford to live. So their primary source of savings is that house with all this equity in it. So I think what we're going to see, and no one really talks about this, but what I think we're going to see is a lot of people that are struggling to survive because their cost of living has gone up so much, and say they get laid off. Well, all of a sudden you're looking at this $350,000 in equity that you have in your house, and you're saying, I got to get that money to survive. So I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to take that equity and I'm going to go rent. And there you go. And that's how you'll get the inventory increase. And that will ultimately bring prices down a little bit.
Well, let me start to wrap things up with a couple of short questions. First one is, say somebody is brand new into Bitcoin. They don't know what BTC stands for. They don't know what Ethereum is, but they're interested in cryptocurrency. From your experience, where's the best place to go to start learning all this stuff?
Well, I think Guy Swan with Bitcoin Audible is a great resource. It's free. It's a podcast. You can just listen to it, on your way to work. And basically, all he does is he reads every article ever that's written about Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go back through his catalog. You can listen to a bunch of stuff as he's working his way into becoming an expert. And I promise you, if you listen to a year's worth of his catalog over the next month, you will know way more about Bitcoin than 99% of people. So that's a very, very easy, free resource. So really no excuse not to take that. Other than that, I mean, obviously YouTube has a ton of resources. You can, once again, for free, that you could go and just search, like, how does Bitcoin work? Like, there's very rudimentary explanations for all this stuff. That's honestly, that's what I did a couple of years ago, is I was trying to understand it because I was a old school, money manager guy. And I was like, I don't understand this stuff at all. Even though I'd had, my libertarian friends that were screaming at me for a decade to buy it, and I poo-pooed them because I was making so much money as a mortgage broker. I fucked up terribly by not listening to them when they first came to me. But there's lots of resources out there.
All right. Thank you very much. And then final question, in terms of cryptocurrency, what is your ideal sort of end game for cryptocurrency in the United States, and what are some of the obstacles you think would hinder that?
I mean, the ideal outcome would be full supplanting of the Federal Reserve and the central banking system. If we were to all conclude that the inflation, say the Federal Reserve relents on their promised interest rate hikes, and we are looking at a very severe cycle of inflation, maybe even hyperinflation for the next couple of years, I think you would see mass adoption of Bitcoin at that point, where people are saying, well, sure, Bitcoin got hammered, but like, I'm losing 25% of my savings every year because I'm being paid with and spending fiat, the US dollar.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be best case scenario, is that they don't have the CBDC ready in time and they can't roll it out, and the inflation cycle hits in earnest too soon, and then you just see mass adoption and utilization of Bitcoin. That would probably be our best bet. Mm-hmm. So obviously I hope that's the case. My personal belief is that they will. I think that they have genius level people, infinite resources that they are pouring into the development of the central bank digital currency as we speak. So I'd be very surprised if they don't have it ready. And I think that the Fed will ultimately manipulate the markets and kind of kick the can and keep the boat afloat long enough that they can roll out the CBDC when ultimately the chickens come home to roost and they realize that the national debt will never be repaid and we have to default.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my bet, that they will have the CBDC ready before they ultimately decide to let the dollar die.
Well, Clint, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
I really, really appreciate it. Very cool episode, super informative. If people want to find you, where would you like them to go?
At Liberty Lockbot on Twitter. I just hit 47,000 followers, which is pretty cool. So if you guys want to hop on the train over there, that'd be great. Once I'm past 50, if you follow me after that, you're a gravy train. You're not an OG fan. Like, you gotta get in there before 50. Everybody else, you're gonna be meaningless to me at that point. Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding.
No. He's being serious, because I got him. I got him before 50. So fuck the rest of you guys.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you want to follow the show, Liberty Lockdown, you can search for it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, everywhere. Just search Liberty Lockdown. You'll find me, or Clint Russell, that may pull it up. But Liberty Lockdown's the surefire way to find me. And I don't know, I have an incredible month of guests lined up. I have Styx Hexenhammer 666, who's this incredible YouTuber that I'm a huge fan of. He'll be on.
He's great.
In August. I'll have Dave Smith. I'll have Josie, the redheaded libertarian. I'll have I'm hoping to get Eric July and Adam Curry. They both are kind of big time in me. We'll see if that happens. And then I had one other huge guest that I am blanking on right now, but it's going to be the biggest month in my show's history. So I hope people will check that out. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
I can't
Been a
wait to have
pleasure.
you again.
Absolutely.
All right. Take it easy, Clint.